Manos and metates were fundamentally important tools to all ancient Maya households as key processing equipment for their most important staple crop, corn, as well as other foods and raw materials. Across the Maya lowlands, manos and metates were made from locally available sources of coarse stone. In northern and central Belize, by far the most abundantly used source for manos and metates was the mountain pine ridge granite. Recent investigations on the periphery of the ancient Maya site of Pacbitun in Belize have produced evidence for the large-scale production of manos and metates using those mountain pine ridge sources, which are just 5 kilometers away. In this paper, we review the results of our efforts to explore granite tool production on Pacbitun's western periphery and ultimately argue that some social segments living in Pacbitun use granite tool production to negotiate the city's place on an increasingly dynamic late classic landscape. The possibility that large-scale granite tool production took place at Pacbitun was first revealed through excavations at a feature termed mano mound. Mano mound is a single mound feature on a hillside located about 650 meters northwest of Pacbitun's core. It attracted interest because of the large number of granite flakes, failed mano fragments, and chert hammerstones found on the surface of the mound and in its immediate vicinity. Excavations revealed a small mound standing 2 meters tall, covering an area 5 by 7 meters, made up of debris matching the byproducts of granite tool manufacture recorded ethnographically. In all, Skaggs et al. Estimated that 1,337 metates and 2,700 manos were produced during the use of mano mound. Additional testing in the immediate vicinity of mano mound revealed at least 2 other small mounds that were similar in composition. In 2018, we conducted a limited pedestrian survey in an area 500 meters northwest of mano mound, where another cluster of production debris mounds was identified. A subsequent examination of existing LiDAR data suggests similar debris mounds are distributed over a much larger area, hinting at granite tool production on a massive scale. To more fully understand granite tool making activities at Pacbitun, we initiated the current research project, whose objectives are to determine the overall extent of granite working, understand the production process represented by granite debris mounds, and explore the social context of granite tool production from household topology. One of our objectives, the first one, was to understand the scale of the granite working at Pacbitun. The original investigations focusing on granite debris demonstrated that the core of a suspected granite working community was centered in an area to the northwest of Pacbitun's center. To begin to address this, we conducted a pedestrian survey of areas centered on known debris mounds. Instead of attempting to record every granite mound, our objective was to map out the geographic extent of those mounds. Given the time and labor available, we decided to conduct the survey in 200-meter wide transects, oriented at the cardinal directions, starting at the center of the presumed community. The production mounds and their scatter of associated debris are substantial enough to be visible without systematic testing, so the survey consisted of full coverage walkover inspection of all areas not covered by dense vegetation. As a result of this effort and previous investigations, we have surveyed a total of 155 acres and recorded 21 granite debris mounds distributed over an area about 1 square kilometer. This, we think, reasonably well defines the overall extent of Pacbitun's granite working community, but we will need to do more systematic work to get a clearer idea of how many production loci were established within it. Another of our objectives is to understand how Pacbitun's residents use these debris mounds to make granite tools. Our excavations at Mano Mound provided important information about the production process in one location. People on the outskirts of Pacbitun created this mound as they made as many as 4,000 granite tools over what appears to be several distinct production episodes. The majority of the mound consists of granite sand, which, based on ethnographic descriptions, would have been created as workers ground manos and metates into their final shape. This step in the process would have been preceded by shaping the tools through percussion using chert hammerstones. Excavators found a dense deposit of granite flaking debris, chert hammerstones, and failed tools around the periphery of the mound. Crews noted several distinct lenses within the large granite sand stratum, suggesting that tool production took place in multiple distinct episodes. To begin to understand if what we learned from mound applied to other debris mounds, we conducted testing at 3 additional features in 2021. On each mound, the crew excavated 1-meter units through the summits and just off the flanks. The summit excavations revealed a stratigraphic profile consistent with mound, including a thick layer of granite sand mixed with granite and chert debitage hammerstones and mano blanks and fragments. On the flanks of 2 of the mounds, we uncovered small walls. The creators of each of the 3 mounds investigated located their granite tool working at the edge of an agricultural terrace. The walls found were not part of the terrace construction, but appear to have been created to maintain a stable working surface. In both cases, the walls began as large, unworked pieces of limestone, but were eventually raised with spent hammerstones, mano fragments, and smaller pieces of limestone as the sand and granite flakes accumulated during tool production. It appears tool producers created and maintained these mounds as working platforms and used them for several seasons. Each season, they likely made hundreds of granite tools, and over the course of the use life of the mound, that number would have reached into the thousands. To continue to expand our sample, we tested 6 additional suspected granite mounds with 50-centimeter tests. Excavators encountered the same thick layer of granite sand with granite flaking debris interspersed. These results, along with the previous testing, show a considerable degree of consistency in debris mound stratigraphy. In general, these mounds consist of a thick layer of granite sand, flanked by larger flaking debris, spent hammerstones, and sometimes retaining walls. In all cases, excavators recorded distinct lenses of granite sand, suggesting that tool production took place in multiple episodes. We suspect each represents a season of use, and producers likely used these surfaces for several seasons. Our third objective in this study has been to understand the social context of granite tool production at Pacbitun. In the testing conducted in 2021, we noted that the 3 mounds tested each had isolated house platforms within 50 meters. We investigated one of those house platforms and found within the structure and on its flanks additional granite flaking debris, mano and metate preforms, and even chert hammerstones for granite working. Given both the proximity and the presence of granite working at the house, we interpret these structures as the domiciles of families directly involved in granite tool working. If the 21 debris mounds identified thus far represent the production of about 4,000 tools, then the number of manos and metates made on Pacbitun's periphery reached well beyond the scale needed for simple household or even polity use. We interpret the debris mounds and associated house platforms as evidence for the existence of a granite working community whose products were intended for regional exchange networks. If this is the case, then we expect the production efforts of those community members was somehow coordinated at a social level above the household, and their products would have been pooled at various levels in a distribution chain. To evaluate this possibility, in the summer of 2022, we excavated 1-meter test units at 2 small, multiple platform groups located in close proximity to 2 different clusters of granite debris mounds. We expected if these social groups were involved in managing granite tool production, we would find granite raw material blanks, caches of finished tools, and possibly even evidence of granite tool production. In neither case did we find any evidence of connection to granite working in our testing. This past summer, we revisited the small group tested in the southwestern portion of the production area. The owner had recently burned and cleared their land, including this small group. While our testing revealed little evidence that the group was connected to granite tool production, our surface inspection revealed abundant evidence of that connection. That evidence includes caches of chert hammerstones used in tool making, unfinished mano fragments, granite flaking debris, and large chunks of granite. Within 100 meters of this group, there are as many as 4 isolated granite debris mounds and 1 unique mound that may represent some kind of special structure related to granite working. We suspect this group represents a larger household involved in tool making and possibly even one of the places where tool production was coordinated and the products gathered for movement in a distribution chain. Another key part of the social context of granite working at Pacbitun is its temporal placement. To date, our investigations have not recovered an abundance of datable ceramics or carbon that can be used to place Pacbitun's granite tool working in time. The materials we recovered are overwhelmingly dominated by the products of granite working, with little evidence of any domestic activities associated with the mounds. At each mound tested, we recovered only small collections of pottery, which very often only include small eroded sherds. Despite this, the types recovered are overwhelmingly associated with the late classic Spanish lookout series, placing the bulk of granite working in the period from 600 to 900 CE. The late classic period is an interesting time on the wider landscape of the ancient Maya and at Pacbitun. During the early classic period, from 300 to 600 CE, Pacbitun was an incorporated provincial polity in the political sphere of the great city of Tikal. Through the early classic, competition increased between Tikal and its rivals, eventually leading to Tikal's defeat near the end of the period. Released from the hegemony of Tikal, Pacbitun became more autonomous and more aligned with local powerful centers in the Belize River Valley during the late classic period. Under these new circumstances, Pacbitun, like other centers in the valley, experienced increasing prosperity that resulted in both the expansion of and recasting of ritual and public architecture. It is within this context that a segment of Pacbitun's population undertook the large-scale production of granite manos and metates. In doing so, people at Pacbitun, whether it be leading families on the periphery or its ruling line, chose to take advantage of their proximity to mountain pine ridge granite sources. The chemical sourcing work done by Tibbets showed that this was the primary source of granite used for making grinding tools across much of Belize and in other parts of the Maya lowlands. While Tibbets was not able to date most of the tools she sourced, it is worth considering that Pacbitun was at least in part responsible for the wide distribution of mountain pine ridge grinding tools. We posit that people at Pacbitun took up the large-scale production of grinding tools out of some necessity or opportunity created by the politically dynamic landscape of the late classic period. For us, the fact that at least some of the production debris mounds and associated households were located on agricultural terraces speaks to the significance of the work. At some level, making manos and metates was deemed more important than growing food on those terraces. Smaller centers like Pacbitun were forced to make their way on a landscape where political influence of regional centers waxed and waned amid the political contractions, social restructuring, and population relocation of the late classic period. Perhaps leaders at Pacbitun used their proximity to mountain pine ridge sources to negotiate favorable relationships with more powerful centers. Alternatively, dominant centers may have exploited Pacbitun's location and reoriented at least parts of its economy as part of hegemonic relations. In conclusion, during the late classic period, a community of granite tool producers was created on the western periphery of Pacbitun. Taking advantage of their proximity to an important source of stone, members of individual households created and used small platforms to make manos and metates. Granite workers located their domiciles near their platforms and intentionally prepared and maintained them as they grew over several seasons of use. While we can see that the scale of tool production was massive, we do not yet know whether it was controlled by Pacbitun Center or by leading households on the periphery. Given the fluidity of the political and social relations at the time, we suspect large-scale granite tool working was a means through which Pacbitun's inhabitants negotiated their place in the Belize River Valley at a dynamic time. Thank you.